Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for Monday, the 25th. And well, we can see what happened on Friday. We talked about this, a break at the 50%. We had that pivot, and I pointed this out from a daily standpoint when that magenta pivots lower, below that 25, and white leading it rarely is a good thing. And in fact, it wasn't. And it didn't take long for things to start to cascade lower, and then it just really snowballed, breaking the 38% right there. And that gives you an idea of what we're looking at, because that line from the trend there goes from the open of the beginning of the year. So not the most ideal year, even though we've had some pretty strong moves both directions, up and down. I mean, there have been plenty of rallies. In the broader move from an NQ, we knew that it was already weaker. It didn't even have that cross above with magenta on the NBI, and literally cascaded much faster and quicker, and we were expecting that it would more likely be moving towards the 0%, which now looks inevitable at this particular stage, given what we see from that setup reading. The fact is, you almost have the steel cross below cyan, and it's guaranteed, but it'll probably be at 0 by the time that takes place. So no shock with what we're seeing there. From a euro standpoint, back down to the lows. It just becomes clear, because it's like they did the exact same thing with the NBI white moving above and just unable to hold it. And we already know that the Eurozone is in a horrible situation. You're not getting much support from the Fed. Recently, the Japanese were asking also for some connective sort of intervention, and it was rejected roundly. And so I think they're expecting a lot of currency turmoil. I think that they could see the handwriting on the wall, and I mean, we watch it with what's been happening with treasuries and that. Gold fading off a little bit. Not surprising, on big down days we usually get some kind of drawdown from gold on that, because people usually liquidate that position in order to have liquidity to cover margin and setups and that. Oil, slight return, still over 100. And that return fade there, still looking weak. Pretty strong DOC with the cyan rejection there, that spider. So we could see a little bit continuation of oil to the downside. And that, I think, is beginning to recognize, as you hear more and more talk about recession, and the recognition that you could see an impact. And we were talking about that, from like a Netflix, and that people starting to cut back on things, and whether it's even a reduction in driving and things like that, reduces demand, which eases the constriction. Here it is, treasuries. So back below the 120. Expected that one. Potential is, though, you could see some bounce back off those lows, because rates now have moved way ahead of where the Fed is. Even if the Fed were to do the 50 basis point spike, not going to nearly be enough. I think the market shock would be 75. I don't know that the Fed really wants to shock the markets more than necessary. But that calculus, with where the market is, still being up at the 4,200 plus range, far off where they would need to think about for really a normalized return, which would be at least back to 3,800 or lower. That would still put us way outside normalized multiples. And again, I think that that's going to be reflective on housing, because when you start to see that the reality is that slowdown in housing and the ripple effect that that has throughout the economy will be more significant than anything. Bitcoin, I talked about it moving back towards that 39 range, and sure enough, right back at it. So supporting here will be critical for it at this particular stage. We do have the turnaround crossover of magenta, and we're also seeing the beginning of blue crossing there from that oversold DOC red, getting close back to that negative 13.5. So the potential for it to support off that is there. Any fade, though, of the magenta readings on that is only going to decay further. So, I mean, with the strong lead of white NBI, it's not encouraging. I wouldn't be running from short setups, but the potential move back to the 23 with that crossover exists. So that's just worth noting that nothing's changed from what those readings are right there. ETH also not as weak as Bitcoin was. Supported well and finished off those lows. And that's just something I've pointed out repeatedly, that Bitcoin's had a bit stronger. Ethereum has had a bit stronger move as far as stabilization and the way it trades than Bitcoin has. 50K, well, yeah, doesn't get any better than that. It started off with the red from the short setup there with the dots. That's the breakdown of the magenta below 25, and DOC spread, where DOC cyan moves above the red DOC there, and boom, it's not changed throughout that entire move. So it added into the short, took that gain, so two shorts within that, but even just staying short from that entire run. Pretty significant when you think about it, because that short signal came at 44.87, we're at 42.50. So it's a couple hundred points in 2 days. Not bad. 5K action. It's also pretty clean. We ended up with the short signal shortly before the open, and it cascaded, and any attempt bounce backs were sporadic at best. You had some white leading, then magenta would take over, but it would turn around, flip, coming back down, made it easy to take it for another run. And then that just pretty much continued throughout the day. Every little teeny pop was barely to the 38% range, and then faded. This one got close to the 50%, but produced another short setup again. And that took us all the way until we ended up with decent improvement from a shakeout. We had the DOC with green leading, and that took place right there. So that was the real indication. It was even clean from that standpoint to take it early. But when you have such a negative day, it's sort of one of those where you really want to wait for that confirmation. It came there, filled back in a little bit, made a secondary high, but then produced pretty clean short setups within that. You had the beginnings of DOC spread there, and then a much stronger one that took place at the second action. So one of those where I like to add into the second setups. It's pretty close price range wise, and it was reading that at the start of the bar. And you can follow those violet dots along with the yellows, suggesting that this was going to continue to fade, and boy, it did. And then even in after hours here, so we dropped another 10 plus in after hours points, so minus 138 there. So a headline kind of grabbing day. That was a significant enough move that gonna catch some attention, and we'll see the impact on Monday, whether or not it starts to generate any margin calls or people caught significantly on the wrong side of that. As always, though, I will update you with relevant details. Trade well, and we'll talk to you later.